Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Clock In podcast. Today I have Ara Brown with us today, otherwise known as Dr. Brown. I like to call him Dr. Brown. He is the former head of middle and upper school at Whittles School and Studios, and now works as the head of the upper school at Polytechnic in Pasadena, California. How are you doing today, Dr. Brown?
I am well. Thank you for having me on, Asher. It's a pleasure to be here.
Of course. Today we'll be talking about his story, and I hope you enjoy. Roll the intro. Hello, everybody. Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Clock In podcast. I'm your host, Asher Reiser, and today we have Miss Bryna Jean Marie. Today I have Ara Brown with us today, otherwise known as Dr. Brown. Today I have Manny Rivera on the podcast today, and today we have Scarlett White here with us today. Today we have Ann Cress, and you're listening to episode 2. Hey, you. I'm talking to you. Sorry for interrupting the podcast, but I gotta tell you about Anchor. It is the easiest way to make a podcast. In fact, it's what I'm using right now. It's free. There are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or your computer. And when you're done, it'll distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to Anchor FM to get started. Now back to your regularly scheduled program. Second interruption? Everyone go check out my good friend Basil Wassinger's new movie, Rocks. It's a great movie. It's comedy / adventure / other things. Go check it out. YouTube, Basil Wassinger, called Rocks. Now back to your regularly scheduled program. All right, so Dr. Brown, just tell the audience a little bit about yourself. What do you do? Favorite activities. Where'd you grow up? Anything you want the audience to know.
Thanks, Asher. I don't know how far you want me to go back when you say tell my story, so I need to be careful of that I'm not boring your listeners. But I have the honor and privilege of serving as the upper school head, the upper school director here at Polytechnic School in Pasadena, California, as you mentioned in your intro. This is my first year in this capacity. I've been in education for over 20 years. I'm really excited to be able to continue my career out here in California. When it comes to things that I enjoy, I'm sure that you've heard this before. I'm a huge fan of Prince.
Yep.
I love listening to music. Definitely listening to Prince music. Huge fan of Marvel. So all the Marvel movies that are coming out. Shows on Disney Plus that are out right now. I never miss an episode. So not sure when this particular one is going to air and what show will be on the air when this comes out. But Loki just wrapped, so I definitely needed to make sure that I watched that in real time. But I think it has a little bit to do with my history. So I don't know if you know this piece. In Asher, we have a relationship, so I know you know certain things about me. That I was a huge comic book nerd growing up.
I do know that.
To the point where I drew all the time, and that was my outlet. That was my escape. And I thought I was going to be a professional comic book artist.
Wow.
So being able to see those things that I love, that I enjoy, that I thought was going to be my livelihood as a kid, that print media now have a new life on the screen, to have millions of people enjoying it. It feels really good. It's like watching your baby grow up.
Yeah, for sure.
And now move out on its own and do all these great things. So, these stories that were near and dear to me as a kid, it's nice to see the masses be able to enjoy them as well. So in my free time, like I said, I continue to dabble a little bit with drawing, not as much as I would hope, but always consuming anything that comes out of the machine named Marvel. And being in great places like DC, I've also spent some time in Michigan and Massachusetts, and now being out here in California, I try to spend as much time outside as possible. So whether it's walking, riding my bike, just taking in the sights, I very much enjoy being a part of of any neighborhood, of any environment.
For sure. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. If the audience doesn't know and you're just tuning in for the season 2, Dr. Brown, I go to Whittles School and Studios currently. Dr. Brown was the head of upper and middle school. So that's how we have that relationship that he was once talking about. And you mentioned you've been in the education world for quite a while. I was wondering, how did you how did you get into the education world? How did you get into the positions that you're at now? Like, what drew you to them rather than, making comic books and things like that?
Oh, such a great question, Asher, because I didn't think I wanted to do this.
Yeah.
that people saw something in me that I didn't see in myself, and that's the reason why I'm in the position that I'm in
Definitely
right now. So to take it back a little bit, let's talk a little bit about high school. And some would argue, I was a great student.
Yeah.
And part of the reason I think people view me as a great student is because I knew how to play school well. I knew how to study certain things, how to memorize formulas just long enough to be able to regurgitate the information on the test. And then I would forget everything no more than a week later.
Yep.
So I figured out that system very well. And during that time, as I mentioned before, is that my outlet was comics. Now, I was involved in the life of the school. So everything from cross country to the tennis team to the school orchestra.
Track.
I very much enjoyed those pieces of the community. I was on the tennis team, but I was horrible at tennis, but it didn't make a difference. I just liked being a part of that team. But comics was always my escape. And I remember getting this offer to draw comics before it was time for me to go to college, right? In my senior year, actually, I take that back. It was the summer of right before my senior year. And my dad pulled me aside, and great man. I have the privilege of my father still being alive. And he is a child of the Great Depression. Right. He is someone who grew up in the Jim Crow era. He is someone who himself is rather light skinned, but his mother was so light. My grandmother was so light that she was able to pass. So in segregated South, she was the one that needed to go into the store to buy items, or she was the one that needed to buy tickets in order to figure out where they were when they were going to different places. And he had this, what I would call a hustler's mentality. Like this idea that you make hay while the sun is shining. If you have an opportunity presented in front of you, you take advantage of it, because there's no guarantee that opportunity is going to present itself a little bit later. So right before going into my senior year, I said, Dad, I got this great opportunity to draw comics. Like, I don't have to go to college. Like, yeah, I know I'm doing pretty well in school, but I don't want to go to college. I want to draw for Marvel one day. And back then it was great people like Jim Lee and Todd McFarlane. These are names that probably mean nothing to you.
Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about.
My generation, the idea of comics, whether it's X-Men or Spawn or Batman or Spider-Man, and these are the individuals that drew these iconic figures. And I idolized them. I wanted to be just like them.
Yeah.
At that point in time, there were not a lot of Black artists,
let
alone a lot of Black comic books, right? There were a few that were out during that time. Clearly, there were great comics like Luke Cage has been out for a couple of decades, and Blade and Static that have been out for a little while, but not a lot of representation in the field. And I was like, this is what I want to do, Dad. I want to be a part of these great comic book houses and have that representation, right?
Yeah.
Like have our voice, have our story be told in the comics. And he said, that's great, but you still need your education. Right. Like, I don't want to stop you from following your passion, from doing art. But is there anything else that you can do in addition to doing art? Right. How can you totally take advantage or completely take advantage of this opportunity? So I started to think about, well, what are the things that I really enjoy? I really enjoy art. I really enjoy drawing, but I also loved psychology.
Yep.
And part of the reason why I love psychology is, I was that friend that people would turn to, and I wouldn't necessarily try to solve their problems, but I would support them through different things. And I wanted to learn more about the human mind. And he, being the great man that he was, saw something in me that I didn't see in myself, said, is there a way to combine these two things together? Your love of art and your love of psychology. So I started to look at art therapy programs. And if you're not familiar with art therapy is basically the field, the idea that you can use art to help unearth, help explain, help support individuals as they're going through a crisis or really any issue at all. So I started to look at programs, and there weren't a lot of programs that existed at the undergraduate level, but I could double major or do a major and a minor.
Right.
So I ended up going to a school where I could major in psychology and minor in art. And during that time, when I was in undergrad, I took every psychology class that was available to me and every art class that was available to me. And again, I don't know if you know this part about me, Asher, when it comes to selecting schools. I don't know if I've ever told you the story, but last name is Brown, right? I went to a public school, and I thought that, you know what I need to do? Ara Brown needs to go to Brown University, right? It's in my name, like it's connected. This is where I need to go. So at maybe like my sophomore year, my goal was to get into Brown University. And that's what I told everyone. I bought all the gear. I would wear it all the time. I thought I needed to go to Brown University. I applied ED to Brown University and had a couple of other offers, right? I was accepted, but had a couple of other offers on the table. So I mentioned I was a little bit of a nerd in high school, right? I knew how to play the game pretty well. So I did have a couple of Ivies, a couple of what people would consider to be good schools. Mm-hmm. And as I was looking for that great program, my dad, who saw something in me, who, that I didn't see in myself, said, don't worry about the name, worry about the place that feels most comfortable to you. Now, it's important that I reinforce this comment because my father never graduated from college.
Yeah.
He went to university, I believe, for 2 years, had a family very young, and actually had to drop out of college to support his family. My mom never went to college. I think she just skated by and got through high school. Mm-hmm. So he said, really choose a school that you would feel comfortable, that would give you opportunities, that would give you the opportunity to make hay while the sun is shining, right? That hustler mentality, and not just go for the name. So as I mentioned, I was privileged, very blessed that I had lots of options in front of me. And I chose a school named Ursinus College. And most people probably have no idea of Ursinus College.
I get emails from Ursinus College.
Oh, then they're doing their job. I'm glad that they do that. It is a small liberal arts school outside of Philadelphia. When I was there were 1,200 kids. They might have 1,400 kids there. But it was an opportunity for me to, instead of being a small fish in a big pond, to be a big fish in a small pond, right? To be able to develop relationships with my professors gave me the opportunity to do research as an undergrad. So I went off to Ursinus College and had an unbelievable experience. And my professors, who saw something in me that I didn't see in myself, made sure that I was involved in every aspect of the school community, to the point where I had so many opportunities around the field of psychology that I knew I wanted to go to grad school to continue my studies. Yep. So I ended up applying to graduate school. I double majored in undergrad, double majored in graduate school. And while I was in graduate school for counseling psychology and organizational psychology, I was working at the same time, right? I had to pay bills. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I didn't mention is that, like my father, I had my first child pretty young while I was in college. And I'll come back to that in a little bit. But I had to make sure that the bills were paid, and found a job working for the university while I was in graduate school. And it was the part of the department that focused on training private school teachers to have leadership positions in school. Now, this was really my first foray into the private school world. I am the product of the Philadelphia public school system.
Yep.
right? No one in my family went to private school. My dad used to always say, why would you pay for private school when there's some great public schools that are out there, right? You just got to find the good public schools.
Yeah.
So interestingly enough, I grew up in South Jersey. I grew up in the suburbs, right? Again, I was privileged. I was lucky. Not the privilege where we were driving Bentleys to school and we had the butler and the maid, but privileged in the fact that there was food in my refrigerator.
Yep.
Right. I had parents who really cared about my well-being. I had clothes on my back, shoes on my feet, and the opportunity to work when I was young. So when I was in high school, well, actually middle school and high school, my dad, with this idea, you just have to find a good school. We left the suburbs, lived in the suburbs, but decided to go to school in Philadelphia rather than South Jersey, which is unheard of, right? Usually people lie about their address in order to get into a suburban school, right? Because those are the good schools. But my dad said that the true value added isn't necessarily all the money that's being spent in school, but the diversity that exists. And in my little suburban middle school and high school, it was not very diverse at all. To put it into perspective, when I was in elementary school, I was the Black kid in the school, right? Not in my grade, in the school. So he wanted to make sure that I had that socioeconomic diversity, that religious diversity, that ethnic diversity, and that cultural diversity as I was moving throughout middle and high school. So even though he did not finish college, my mother didn't take any college classes, both of them really understood the value of education.
Yeah.
So fast forward a little bit, I was in graduate school. Again, no idea of what private schools are like. And I got this job working for a program at this university that trains teachers. And God rest her soul, Pearl Rock Kane, who was my boss during that time, was phenomenal. She was a mentor for my entire professional career and saw something in me that I did not see in myself. See, there's a little bit of a trend here, right? Because I thought I wanted to be a counselor. I thought I wanted to be a therapist. That's why I was in graduate school. She told me that I needed to go work in a private school, and more specifically, being a young person with a young family, it would be great for me to be a part of a community. So I should look at boarding schools. So I looked at a couple of boarding schools based on her recommendation, found a school in Massachusetts, and fell in love with working in education. I never thought that I was going to be in education, right? Let alone a teacher. An administrator, that's a whole nother story. As my mother tells the story, I was the kid who had difficulty speaking in front of class. Now I'm speaking in front of students and faculty all the time. It's a pretty interesting juxtaposition. Never would have imagined myself ending up in this career, but I appreciate, I value, I love every second that I have the opportunity to spend in this field, especially because I get the opportunity to work along great people like yourself, Asher.
I appreciate that.
It has truly been a joy getting to know you, getting to start things at Whittles School and Studios, and like I said, to be able to continue my career here at Polytechnic in California.
Man, honestly, it was a lot of messages that I like to teach in my podcast. More specifically, the idea that your passions are always going to change. And I think you represent that a lot, especially with wanting to be going to art. And then you were like, how can I implement this? So art counseling? What was it that
it was art. First, I wanted to be
art therapy.
Not just art, like a comic book artist.
Right. Comic book artist, Marvel. Gotta remember that.
That's
right. You wanted to be a comic book artist, Marvel. Then you went to art therapy. Then it was psychology, and then it was education, and it was just a whole. Maybe I missed some steps there, but it's a whole process in which you find what you love, and I think that's really important, especially because this podcast is directed towards teenagers, where there's this narrative, and I talk about this a lot, but if you're a new listener, you can listen to it again, is that like this narrative that teenagers and kids need to know exactly what they want to do for the rest of their life is just false. And it's hard for kids like me to really know what they want to do and know what college they want to go to if they're just, this narrative just forced in their face. And there's another point that you mentioned that I really spoke to, is that combining your two passions together. This podcast, for example, it is somewhat of a business. I've made some money from it. But I've also always loved talking to people and talking about people's stories and learning from them, which is the implement of psychology and knowing how people think. And in college, that's something that I might want to do, is I want to learn about business, entrepreneurship, and I want to learn about psychology. I want to learn how to talk to people. I want to learn how people work. Another thing is I love editing, and it's just a lot of things that like multiple passions can combine into one thing. And that's the beauty of college, is that you don't have to focus on math and focus on psychology or social studies or anything like that, like you would in high school. And I agree with what you said. I always said that high school is a game. Before college, everything is a game. You have to play it in order to get where you want to go. And I think having that mindset is beneficial, but at the same time, it's like it can confuse you, because that's where the narrative comes through, is like if you're only playing this game and you're only focusing on these math and social studies, then you're gonna think that you have to focus on this one thing for the rest of your life. And I think that's what like a lot of schools do, and I think that's what Whittle does differently, is that it changes this narrative that you don't have to focus on one thing, and it gives you the opportunity to do projects and to do different things, to branch your mind and find what you're passionate about, but not just one thing. A multitude of things that you're able to create and do. And I think it's awesome, and I think more schools need to do stuff like that, and I know more schools do. I just use Whittle as an example because I go there and I'm a little bit biased, but yeah,
it's a great place, and they're doing great work. There's no question about that. And I just want to reiterate something that you said around two things. One is around passion.
Mm-hmm.
It is nice. It is great if a young person, if a 17-year-old can find their passion, but that's a lot of pressure.
It is.
Right? A lot of pressure at that age. Instead, you want to think about that through line. And I appreciate you talking about the things that you enjoy, right? So whether it is editing, pulling things together, right? I know that you're a lover of baseball as well. You didn't necessarily bring that up.
Baseball. I do love baseball. Sports is definitely a top of my list type of thing.
Yeah, but all those things that you enjoy, whether it's editing, whether it's psychology, you look at that through line, and I think about my own career, my own trajectory. While it was not a straight line, I wasn't 17 years old and said I want to be an administrator in education. But this idea of helping people, this idea of motivating people, this idea of telling the story, it's always been there.
Mm-hmm.
When I wanted to be a comic book artist, I wanted to inspire people
right.
through my art. Right, going into psychology, I wanted to be able to help and inspire people through psychology, through that training. And now being in education, a field that I feel really good about. I'm glad that Pearl Rock Kane saw something in me that I didn't see in myself and encouraged me to get into education. I'm not in education to have a fancy title. Yep. I'm not in education to flex my ways onto others, but I'm here to inspire. I'm here to support. I'm here to bring the best out in the students and faculty that I'm around. So regardless of whatever title I have or what job that I'm in, there is that clear through line that exists. And I think what schools should be doing, and Whittle is one of those great places, is exposing you to an array of different opportunities, of different options, looking at some of the world's issues and problems and working through that, solving that, and you'll pick up the content along the way. Definitely. There's no question about that at all. But that's going to allow you to figure out those things that you're passionate about. Definitely. And those things that you may not care for, rather than trying to figure that out when you're 30, when you're 40, when you're 50. You have the opportunity to be exposed to it right now.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. And I think that more schools need to pick up what I'm laying down in this podcast. So, if you listen to it, share it with your school, whatever, give me some promotion.
Absolutely. Can I just add one more quick thing?
Go ahead.
This was a side note that you said, but I think it's important to reinforce this, because you talked about the fact that you made a little bit of money off of this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like something that you love. And one of the things that I try to stress with everyone that I come across, whether it's me supporting faculty as they move throughout their career or chatting with students, do what you love in life, because you can make money doing anything.
Yep.
And if this is what you love, yes, you can make a living off of it. You can make a very good living off of it. I am comfortable right now in my position, right? As people look at education, like, no, I can never do that because I want to, live a certain lifestyle or have certain things. And not that money is the driving factor for all people. But if it is something for you, you can make money doing 100%. Anything. So why not do something that you love? Because it's going to be a big part of your life.
Yeah.
And then the money will come right behind. Definitely.
It. And I mean, that's the sad truth, is that like without money, you're not going to be able to really provide and be able to do the things that you love. With $0 in your bank account as an adult, there's not a whole lot you can do. And that's the sad truth. But the other truth is that if you put hard work into something that you love, you will be successful. And with hard work, you can get really anywhere you desire. And I think that's a really important thing, especially for teenagers that are still living and still trying to grow, and still their brains are still not fully developed. They need to learn these lessons. That's something that my mom says a lot, is that your brain isn't fully developed and you need to learn these things. And like, I disagree with you, but I also really agree with you.
Listen to your mom. She's a smart person.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this was a fantastic interview and a fantastic podcast. As you can see, I do not have the pro Zoom, so we don't have a lot of time left. So it was truly fantastic to have you on, and I really appreciate it. And I loved your story. Is there anything else you want to say to the audience? Anything else you would like to? Any messages? I don't know.
I wish I had some great message to say, if you do this, you'll find happiness in life, or you will be so much better off. There is no magic bullet, right? Everyone takes their own path. Again, my path was not straight. I just want to reinforce what you're doing with this podcast, right? This opportunity to hear people's stories, to understand that there are many different ways to reach that goal, to get to that endpoint that you may travel in life. And through every opportunity, through every experience, it's the chance for you to learn something new about yourself.
Yeah.
The last thing I will share is that no individual is an island. So I know with your particular story, Asher, that you got to this place, you got to this point through a conversation with your mother.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. That not to say that you weren't motivated to do something like this, that you're not inspirational on your own. But again, it was your mom encouraging you to do that.
She saw something in me that I didn't see in myself.
And what I would encourage folks on this podcast to do, one, is always think about the power of relationships, because that relationship might be your next job, your next opportunity that you weren't even aware of. So those things are really, really helpful. And two, don't be afraid to ask questions, right? Don't be afraid to rely on someone else to get you to where you need to be. Again, I've been very privileged in my life to have people around me who believed in me, right? Who saw things in me. And my job is to now pay that forward. Right? Just to make sure that now that I have certain things that I have access to that I didn't always have access to in my life, that others have access to those things as well. So to take what I've learned, to take what I have, and make sure that others can reach their goals as well. So you're the one really with the inspirational message, Asher. And if this is folks' first time listening to the podcast, I strongly encourage you to go back and listen to season 1.
Yeah.
Every person that you've interviewed has shown a great light, shed a great light, or given a great perspective on the nonlinear path to things, but ultimately how they've been able to reach a fulfilling life, of their fulfilling goal. So to go back and listen to those,
definitely
to continue to be inspired. So
I agree.
I appreciate this tremendously, more than you know. It's always good connecting with you. I will continue to follow the podcast. I do subscribe, so I'll continue to listen to the podcast, and I'm anxious to see what we continue to do in the future.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Yeah, what he said, listen to the podcast, subscribe, share with your friends. These are messages that a lot of people need to hear, even grown adults need to hear sometimes. So thank you again so much, Dr. Brown, for being here. It is always a pleasure talking to you. I hope you all enjoyed as well. This was Dr. Brown and Asher Reiser. We are clocking out. Bye-bye.